hug and said, "We are gonna be friends." And we have been ever since. She came and read to my class as a mystery reader pre-pandemic, and one of my students was oversharing a bit, and she kindly and firmly reminded that student that other children might like to share, and he turned and looked at me and whispered, rather sotto voce, "She's a real teacher." And I said, yes, she is, and I think she is for all of us. So thank you, and thank you again to the teachers who donated to the Dr. Levesque School, and I hope that other people go on social media. There are a number of ways that you can contribute to those efforts and make sure that they all have a successful school opening. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, we're going to move on, and it's my great pleasure to welcome a new addition to our board, Mike McClellan, who is the newly appointed Raymond representative. Mike comes to us with quite a bit of expertise, actually. He was in the Maine legislature, and he was on the education committee, and he also, before we consolidated, was on the school board in Raymond. So we are very, very excited to have you on board, and welcome. I don't know if you want to say anything, but you all said? Okay, welcome aboard. We're delighted to have you. We're going to move right into the meaty subject this evening, which is the RSU 14 proposed reopening plan. Mr. Howe will present the plan, and I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you, Mrs. Briggs. And also, again, I just want to apologize to Mr. McClellan and Ms. Small for not having you on my attendance list tonight. I also want to point out something that I learned yesterday about Mike, is that Mike was actually on the building committee for the Raymond Elementary School and was involved in site selection for that site there in Raymond, and was able to share a great story about how that piece of property was acquired. So it's great to have you on the board and have that connection, and I look forward to working with you on this. So I can't remember a topic that the board's taken on or that I've worked on in the last 25 years that I've been here in RSU 14 that has been as polarizing as the school reopening plan that we're talking about tonight. Obviously been through a number of policy conversations over the years, and as you can imagine, over the last weeks, my email has been filled with, I don't think I've ever answered so many emails en masse and reopening as I have within the last 3 weeks. And so, and interestingly enough, I've obviously had a chance to hear from people on both sides of this issue. And again, I don't remember an issue facing RSU 14 that has been this polarized. And part of that is because last year, and for those of you who may have been here, it was about a year ago today that we were all sitting in the auditorium trying to determine whether or not RSU 14 would actually open for in-person instruction. And we had lengthy conversation, lengthy public input as to whether or not that was the right move to actually open, and at that time a hybrid model, or to stay closed and wait until October in order to open the school. So more than happy that we were able to open, and I'm more than happy that this particular time in the session is that we will be able to welcome all of our students back here at the end of the month. And you know, there were points in the pandemic that we've been through last year where I wasn't quite sure that was going to be a possibility. So I'm excited for that ability to be able to walk kids in and to be able to see kids. I think tonight the board will have an opportunity to hear how are we going to do that, under what circumstances, and to get an understanding of what some of the guidance is that's out there. Something that's very, very different from this year compared to last year is that last year we were in a state of emergency that was declared by the legislature, broad powers given to the governor at that time, and everything became a mandate. When those powers and that executive order disappeared back on June 30, all those powers went away and everything became a local decision and became a recommendation versus a mandate. So school boards across the state, I can think of at least 4 peers tonight that are having a similar night tonight, talking about reopening plans and having that opportunity for public discussion on what it is that they're going to open. I think all of us have kind of that same broad idea, is that, and same emphasis, we want kids back in school. No question about it. We want our kids back, and we want them back 5 days a week. And we want to see our cafeterias, our gyms, our auditoriums, our classrooms back to capacity. I think all of us want that. I think all of us, after living for the last 18 months, for those who have younger children, your children haven't yet experienced what school's like. For those of you like me who are on the opposite end, high school, half my son's high school career has been pandemic. And so we've got kids and families representing both ends, and we fully understand that this is a highly charged topic. And I know tonight I will be popular with maybe half the people in the room, and the other half may question why it is that I'm actually making a recommendation. And that's why we have public comment, that's why we have public conversations about such things. So this is meant to be a dialogue, and there'll be opportunity at the end for some public comment for us to talk. So some broad overarching themes. Board members, you actually have a copy of this presentation in your packet, so you don't have to kind of cream your head over. And for those of you who are here, and for those of you who may be watching our Zoom broadcast, we'll make sure that this gets posted to the website tomorrow if anybody wants to go ahead and peruse the presentation. But here's some general themes that we have been using as we've been working through our planning, is that number one, we want our kids to be healthy and safe. No question about it, that's the number one responsibility of a school district beyond education, is to make sure students, while they're in our care, that they're safe. Other overarching planning theme, we want all students to return to full in-person instruction 4 or 5 days a week. No question about it, okay? We all, yes, you can clap, I'm for that too. There's no question about it, we want that. But within that, we also want to make sure that the number of students and staff members who have to be excluded from school during quarantine, that we can reduce as much as possible. Last year in my office, 152 phone calls from our building administrators. We ended up quarantining, I think it was 1,408 students and a little over 300 staff. And we do have some staff members and some students that were quarantined as much as 5 or 6 times. So in, out, in, out, in, out, did not work for people. So we want to make sure that we're reducing those numbers. We don't want to be quarantining students. We don't want to be quarantining staff members. And for those of you who've heard me talk to the pandemic, there were nights literally where I wasn't quite sure whether or not we have school the next day because of staffing. And so kudos to all of our professional staff who made that happen. And then second of all, to maximize the number of instructional minutes throughout the school year. We want our kids here all 175 days that they're scheduled, and we want to make sure that we're not bouncing in and out throughout the school year as we go through whatever this pandemic has to hold for all of us. So I want to start first of all with CDC recommendations, and members of the board have heard me talk about this, and also some people on our governance team and others that I've had individual conversations with. I was not a big fan when CDC came out with blanket recommendations for the country. And the reason behind that is that here we are in Wyndham and Raymond. We're very different than other places in the country. We have different vaccination rates, we have different community protectors, we have a degree of geographical isolation, and the same broad standards that were being initially suggested for maybe some large cities and some other states were then being applied. Was not a big fan of that. Certainly was not a big fan of that when initially we started getting into some of the guidance, and things in Maine were okay. Cumberland County was looking okay, and we were also looking at, do we do masks? Do we make a mask recommendation? Do we not make a mask recommendation? Based upon where we were at that time. And so we talked through, do we accept a mandate, or in this case a recommendation, that's a broad recommendation, or do we wait and see? The other big important lesson which I've learned throughout this pandemic is that things change, and things can change very quickly. And even over the last 2.5 weeks, we've seen guidance changes. And today is, what, August 11th? Things could look very, very different on August 30th when we go open school to our students. So we've been through this kind of peaks and valleys. And if you look at the pandemic, and even our experiences throughout the school year, we had times of declining cases, rapid increases, declines, and we seem to be kind of coasting in as the pandemic works its way on. So those CDC recommendations, these national recommendations that came out, number one, this has been a priority. It's been a priority in all the meetings that I've had, either with superintendents or the commissioner or with other people. Students need to be here in person. We're not interested in moving towards remote unless we absolutely have to. We need to be in person. In person is a priority. And second of all, vaccination. And I'm thankful to live in an area where a number of people are vaccinated. We have high vaccination percentages as compared to other states and other areas. The third one, and I think that's why we might actually have the crowd here tonight, due to the circulating highly contagious Delta variant, CDC recommends universal indoor masking. And this was new. This came out on July 29th, and it was contrary to a July 9th guidance, which basically said the kids that were not vaccinated should be masked, and those that are vaccinated shouldn't be, excuse me. So it was a quick turnaround. In 20 days, we had 2 different pieces of guidance. This next bullet, which is important, schools maintaining at least 3 feet of social distance within the classrooms. But something very different from last year was the guidance that if you can't do 3 feet of social distance, and if you remember correctly, for those of you who attended public forums, if I'm at a meal or something like that, being in school takes precedence over the social distancing. And that's important. That's a huge departure from guidance in the previous year, which was social distancing trumps everything. In this case, it was we want to make sure that we get kids in school. And so they talk about layered strategies, your heating, your ventilation, universal masking. Also talk about pool testing and other things that you can quickly identify. But the most important thing, the most important priority, social emotional health of our students through attendance in school and making sure that they're here every day. The second piece, screening, testing, ventilation, hand washing, respiratory etiquette. I think these are things that have started to become old hat for us if we've been through the pandemic. People should stay home if they're sick. 2 nurses there in the front row will tell you that from the first day of school to the last day of school. If you're sick, stay home. And that doesn't change. Another important piece, students under the age of 12 who are not currently eligible for vaccination. And in the case of RSV-14, that's 53% of our population is not currently eligible for vaccine. Whether or not that happens, the best case scenario that I've heard is maybe around the turn of the year, so January, February, maybe a time that thing could be approved for our younger students. But up until then, they do not have that ability. So guidance talks about nice layered strategies, making sure that you're doing as much prevention as possible. Again, masking, making sure that you are properly cleaning surfaces, and also making sure that protecting people by those who are sick staying home. And obviously this last one here, the prevention strategy, being critical to protecting people. All right, the last piece. Locality should monitor community transmission, vaccination coverage, screening, testing, and occurrence of outbreaks to guide decisions. I think that's part of why we're here tonight, is that what does the community look like? What does vaccination look like? What are the opportunities? How do we go ahead and protect those students that aren't vaccinated? And how do we go about protecting our general population? Because the one thing that I did not include in my initial statement as guiding, kids legally have to come to school. They don't have a choice. So it's not like you can actually, as a kid in the state of Maine, I've got a lot of choice for schools, you don't. And so the student who comes and has an illness or other issues, or the student that feels like they need to have that protection from those around them as far as masks go, kids have to be in school. It's not a choice for them. And it's very, very different than I can choose travel soccer. I want to travel soccer and expose myself great, or not expose myself by whatever conditions put in place. I can make that choice. I have to come to school. and I have to sit in the classroom, and I have to sit in that classroom with other students. And those students may be vaccinated or not, those students may be exposed to things or not, or other things in the community. So it's a piece to remember. So Cumberland County, it's a data piece, and I'm sure most of you by now have, I think we've initially started to feel a little bit of whiplash when the data started to come out about levels of community transmission and the CDC recommendations that came along with it. So Cumberland County, August 11th, this is today, and if you remember correctly from the metric, if a county is blue, it has very low community transmission. If it's yellow, then it's considered to be moderate, and Cumberland County was actually moderate for quite a while. If something is orange, it's substantial, and then if we get into red, we're starting to see significant transmission. I think something's a little different with Maine is sometimes the populations are smaller, populations can skew, but what we're starting to see here is some case numbers within Cumberland County starting to rise a little bit. So let's talk about Cumberland County. 72.1% of the population is fully vaccinated. That's outstanding. Statewide, Cumberland County is one of the most vaccinated counties in the entire state. 81.7% of individuals ages 12 and above are fully vaccinated, and 94.3% of individuals ages 65 and above are fully vaccinated. So people in the state have actually taken advantage of those vaccine opportunities, and many of the vaccine clinics that we saw that did the large-scale vaccine have actually now closed, and things are being targeted towards those smaller populations. RSC-14 did hold the vaccination clinic for high school, and our middle school kids were eligible. We had about 340 families that took advantage of that opportunity. Maine Health, Maine Med came in and partnered with us with that. Let's talk about RSC-14. Most eligible staff, the last time I took a look at the data, we were at about 96 to 97% of our staff have been fully vaccinated. I say most in this because we had some staff turnover, we had some new staff members. I don't know their vaccination status. I need to work with the nurses on that. Also for the public, so that you know, we actually, schools across the country, schools across the state will be reporting out on the vaccination status of their staff members starting in September. And Maine CDC will be reporting that out. 47% of RSC-14 students are currently eligible for the vaccine. I can't tell you right now how many of that 40% or what percentage have actually been vaccinated. We've not received those numbers yet, that metric. We're supposed to be receiving that from the Maine Department of Education, Maine CDC, or Department of Health and Human Services in the upcoming weeks. And it's important to note here that 53% of students in RSC-14 are not currently eligible for vaccination. That number, those are our pre-K to 6 students. And yes, there are some 6th grade students that may be eligible, but most at this point are falling underneath that age, so between that two. So right now, we have some increased transmission that's happening within Cumberland County. We've all heard about the Delta variant in a briefing that I did with the commissioner and with Dr. Shaw and with other health officials. It's the predominant variant that they're seeing. And we're also hearing about breakthrough with people who've been vaccinated. The number I read today, I think, was 700 cases statewide have been breakthrough cases. And where you are in vaccines is up to where you're at with vaccines. For me, it's a piece of data as we look at where we're at. So here's Cumberland County back on July 1. And if you notice on the map, we were blue, very, very low transmission. In fact, if you look at that time of the month, cases in our area were about 2 or 3 per day. Very, very small drop. But as the summer started to go along, started to see greater transmission, started to see things start to ramp up a little bit. Here's where we were yesterday for Cumberland County data, and here's where we are today, where we have some counties that have actually changed, and that transmission rate has gone up a little bit. So I know there's been some questions about
emphasis as far as not continuing a civics lecture, but simply the fact that we were all hearing about, overturning a filibuster in the Senate takes 2/3. So I'm going to emphasize 65% of the voters of the town of Raymond want an RSU. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter.
Thank you, Peter.
All right. Anybody else want to speak? No? All right, back to the board. What do you guys want to do? What are you thinking?
I'm thinking there's a lot of good applicants.
Yes, indeed.
So it makes it very difficult.
Usually it's 1 or 2 and it's pretty cut and dry.
But unfortunately, there's only one position open.
I'd like to make a motion to have Shara Jewell be the candidate for the RSU.
Anybody want to second that? Nope. Okay. Anybody else have a motion? Or anybody want to rule anybody else out?
I don't think that's.
No,
All right, no, I'm trying to figure out how you guys want to come to this.
no, they're all
I'll make
great
a motion
applicants.
for Mike McClellan to be appointed.
I'll second, Mike.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second. All right. Any more discussion on that or any other conversations? Okay. All right, so we have a motion for Mike, a second motion for Mike. Second. All right, no more discussion? All in favor? All right. Mike, thank you. And thank you to everybody for coming out and putting in the
Thank you very
applications.
much.
Thank you, everybody.
And I hope that if there's more, if there is a vacancy,
Don't be discouraged.
yeah, please don't.
Absolutely
There's
don't.
plenty plenty of help we need. We need plenty of help.
We have
Your
more.
presentation was terrific, I thought.
It was.
Yeah.
All right, we have more applications.
But Phoebe, you don't really sound the way your mother